Okay, third graders, here we are at the last part of our lesson on fractions that are equal to a whole, greater than a whole, and other whole numbers. So this is part 3, and in this lesson we're going to use what we learned about fractions that are equal to one whole and what we learned about fractions that are equal to more than one whole to understand that there are some fractions that are equal to other whole numbers. Actually, there's lots of them. Here we go. So remember, a fraction can be equal to 1. Those were all the fractions like 2 halves and 4 fourths and 9 ninths, where the numerator and the denominator are equal. There are also fractions that can be more than 1, and that's when the numerator is greater, like, for example, 14 thirds or 12 tenths, where the top is greater than the bottom. That means that we have one whole figure or more than one whole figure filled in and then some extra as well. Now we're going to talk about fractions that can be equal to other whole numbers. So this one can be kind of tricky, but also kind of fun, and you get to use your multiplication and division facts that you've been working on all year. Okay, so we still know that the denominator is the number of parts in one whole. So if I look at this and I have these 2 cookies, one cookie is the same as 2 parts, right? So there's 2 parts in each of my cookies. 1, 2. Okay. The numerator still represents the total number of shaded parts. So in this case, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shaded parts. But we also can see from the picture that we have 2 whole cookies. Do you see that? We've got 4 shaded parts in cookies that are cut into 2 parts. But if we just put it all together, we see that we've got 1 cookie and another cookie. So that equals 2. Do you remember in, I think it was the first video, when I said that there's a common misconception going around that 2 over 2 equals 2, and I told you that that's not true at all? 2 over 2 equals 1. That's because 4 over 2 equals 2. That's because 4 over 2 is really the same thing as 4 divided by 2. If I've got 4 total parts divided into 2 cookies, I've got 2. There it is. 2. So really, fractions are another way of displaying division. Let's look some more. Here I have, we'll call it cakes, 2 cakes. Each of my cakes is broken into thirds. My denominator represents the number of pieces in one whole. 1, 2, 3. But I have 6 parts shaded. 6 thirds, as you can see from the picture, is exactly the same thing as 2 whole sheets of cake. It's also because 6 divided by 3 equals 2. 6 divided by 3 equals 2. Here's another one. My cakes are still broken into thirds, but now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pieces. How many whole cakes is that? That's 1 cake, 2 cakes, 3 cakes, 4 cakes. So 12 thirds is the same thing as 4, because 12 divided into thirds means that I've got 4 cakes. 12 divided by 3 equals 4. So since we know that it's basically just division, we can rewrite it that way. 15 thirds is exactly the same thing as 15 divided by 3. If 15 divided by 3 equals 5, and we know it does because 3 times 5 equals 15, that means 15 thirds is the same thing as 3. I could draw that. If I have my cake broken into thirds, that's 1 whole cake. 1, 2, 3. Then I add another cake. 4, 5, 6. And I add another cake. 7, 8, 9. Then I add another cake. 10, 11, 12. I'm almost there. I'm shooting for 15. 13, 14, 15. How many cakes did I have to draw before I had 15 pieces? I had to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cakes. 12/4 is the same thing as 12 divided by 4. If I had, let's call them brownies. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one sheet of brownies. 5, 6, 7, 8. That's another one. 9, 10, 11, 12. How many pans of brownies did I have to bake in order to have 12 brownies? I had to bake 3 pans. So 12/4 is the same thing as 3. Let's do some more practice. 20 seconds. That's the same thing as 20 divided by 2. You should know that math fact. If you don't know that math fact, you could flip it around. 2 times what equals 20? 2 times 10 equals 20. So that means 20 halves is the same thing as 10. If I drew ten cookies, all cut in half, if I put all those halves together, I would have 20 halves, 10 whole cookies. Okay, 9 divided by 3 equals 3. So 9/3 equals 3 wholes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I just proved it with a picture. Okay, I'm going to get you started, then you're going to pause, then you're going to come back and check your answers. 6/3 is the same thing as 6 divided by 3. You figure out what that is, then you'll know what 6/3 is. 8 halves is the same thing as 8 divided by 2. If you know what that is, then you can tell me what 8 halves are. Pause your video now. 6/3 is the same thing as 2 because 6 divided by 3 is 2. So 6/3 equals 2. I could draw it. Not with a circle, I can't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had to draw 2 candy bars broken into thirds in order to have 6 pieces. 8 halves is the same thing as 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So 8 halves equals 4. Because if I have to draw a bunch of cookies cut in half, I will have to draw 4 total cookies before I have 8 halves. Your turn again. Pause now. Here you go, my darlings. Here are your final answers. If you drew a picture, this one would maybe look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 candy bars broken into 5 pieces. That equals 2 whole candy bars or 10 pieces. This one, I'm going to go with those weird foods that I had earlier that were shaped like triangles. Still never figured that out. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I had to draw 7 triangles cut in half in order to have 14 halves. That means 14 halves is the same thing as 7. So what you need to remember is your numerator and your denominator is the same thing as numerator divided by denominator will give you the whole number. So if it is 6/2, that is 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So 6/2 equals 3. You have a Google form to practice this, and then you are done with your math for the week. Remember, you can also do iReady to practice, and you can also practice your math facts because clearly we can see that they are important in fractions. Adios.